This video is brought to you by Basius. Even with the introduction of the M1 Max, specifically the newer MacBook Pros like this one right here, iPad Pro remains a cult favorite and still one of my favorite Apple devices. But I think we can all agree for the past 2 years, Apple has kind of neglected it with software. I mean, iPadOS 14 was kind of a given because the previous version, iPadOS 13, was so huge and feature-packed, and that was the software update that got me on board and excited to begin with. But when iPadOS 15 rolled around, I think a lot of us expected more. And I will say this, us YouTubers had some unrealistic expectations. We, anticipated stuff that really wasn't gonna happen, specifically due to probably world events. But it still was a letdown. And if Apple doesn't come out with a really nice version of iPadOS this year, specifically iPadOS 16, they're gonna be letting iPad Pro users down big time. So this is why I titled the video, The Last Straw or whatever it is. And with that said, I wanted to bring back an amazing friend of mine and content creator, Christopher Lawley, to talk about iPadOS 16 and what we should expect. Realistically, all that. If you don't know, he is like the iPad Pro user more than anyone I've ever seen. Chris, what's going on?
Hey, thanks for having me back. I'm excited to be here and talk about my favorite platform, the iPad. I think your intro was really good and kind of gave a very fair summary of the state of the iPad. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into it with you.
Amazing. All right, so I've made a list of questions here, just sort of outlining what we should expect from iPadOS 16 and kind of just talking about the current situation with iPad. Because like I said, Apple has really paid attention to the Mac, and they needed to, because if you remember, iPad Pros were outpacing Macs for like years. So this has been great, but we want some more attention on the iPad. So Chris, I will pose this question. Of course, I'll weigh in as well. What keeps you from depending on the iPad Pro solely as of right now?
So for me, I did use the iPad as my sole computer for 4 years. My work was evolving, but the iPad software specifically, the hardware has been doing great, but the software hasn't been evolving with my needs and the stuff that I want to do. And it got to the point where I was like, okay, I can either hold myself back or I could get a Mac, work on both the iPad and the Mac, and keep my work going forward. Now, ultimately, I really want to stay only on the iPad. I really do. Keep that in mind for this whole conversation. I am somebody that loves the iPad. It is my favorite platform. It's where I want to do all my work, but just the capabilities just aren't there for me right now to be able to do that. The iPad just doesn't fit the needs for certain pro users. Now, if you're somebody that, travels a lot and your main needs for a computer are checking email, writing up documents, things like that, the iPad's probably going to be perfect for you.
Yeah, I would totally agree. That's kind of what I've been using it for as a student, although I really do depend on my Mac. And I think the difference between you and I, Chris, is that I kind of knew that the iPad was kind of whack for video editing. And something we have to remember is that not everybody's doing video editing. That is why I think so many YouTubers
100%.
were called out last year, because we were like, oh, where's Final Cut? And everyone's like, we don't all want Final Cut. But it is valid. And, Apple being the company that it is and how they, sort of really want people to create with their, products, and they put, the M1 chip in there, you would only expect that to be the case, but it wasn't. Obviously there were, reasons that you and I have discussed, which we'll probably bring up, sort of like predictions as to why iPadOS 15 was let down. But yeah, I would say myself, I find myself using my Mac more to create simply because it's now more powerful. It's a lot like my iPad Pro in terms of refresh rate and brightness and experience and design. And yeah, it doesn't video edit. If it could video edit, that would be great. Although I will say I wouldn't use it just solely. I'm still going to be a Mac/iPad person moving forward, I'm pretty sure, unless in the future iPads and Macs are synonymous. But yeah, I totally think your points are valid, or I vibe with a lot of what you're saying here. That's such a Gen Z thing to say. I'm sorry. But anyway, moving on here. Okay, so with saying that, my next question is, why do you think iPadOS 15 was such a letdown? I know we had discussed this last year, but I think it's important to sort of bring up why this was the case. What are your predictions again, Chris?
I go back. I don't know if it was necessarily a letdown. I would say it's definitely a minor or smaller update. I don't know. I always try and avoid the oh, like over the top title reactions, they messed this up, stuff like that. I try and be a little realistic, and I understand. One, it was a year two of the pandemic. Like, I don't know if it was just like. Yeah, like if they were capable of making a huge release. I also think in our heads we're still comparing every iPadOS release to iPadOS 13, the first one, which was a major one. And if we roll back the clock a little bit, iPadOS 13, the rumors were at least that it was originally slated for iOS 12 year, but there were so many reliability and buggy issues with iOS that they pushed it back a year. So they
and that's
gave
the thing
them
about Apple,
an extra
right?
year.
They're so OCD about having everything perfect. So they spend like extra amounts of time, probably more than they maybe even need. But you know what? That's their standards. So yeah, maybe they're back to work sort of policies, or just not having everybody there in office sort of affected iPadOS. What would have been 15's development, maybe there was other features, but maybe because it's such a big shift away from, or just moving forward, maybe there's Windows, maybe there's a new way to connect to an external display. That's big. That's not just a feature or two that they're adding, so maybe it needed more time, and we'll see it this year, but I don't know. You tell me. Not that you can. We're just speculating here.
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of getting at. Is I have a feeling, and this is a feeling. I know nothing. That
I don't either.
iPadOS 15 could have maybe there were features slated for iPadOS 15 that just weren't ready. They weren't ready to make the cut. They weren't going to be finished by September. So it was just an easy option to push them back to iPadOS 16.
And it was a good update. You're right. It was a good update.
There was great features like keyboard shortcuts. Like the keyboard shortcuts update was amazing. Like there were more system-wide keyboard shortcuts put in. The new menu is really great. I really like it. Updates to shortcuts. The home screen stuff kind of got updated. Yeah, multitasking updates. There's the buttons at the top. There's a lot of really good stuff. I mean, I did a 40-minute video that is a very, very dense 40-minute video on all the stuff that's in iPadOS 15.
And this is why iPadOS. I invite Chris on. Because all this stuff, and he was actually the person that sort of, what did you say? You talked me off a ledge when I was like, oh, I did. Man, this sucks. What am I going to talk about?
After the keynote last year, you were on that edge, and I was just like,
my video was titled just disappointed. I was wrecked. And I think something important to remember is that, us tech YouTubers, we thrive when the tech is good, So I was excited to talk about new features. I was excited to talk about Final Cut, and when, this magical update didn't come to complement the M1 chip in the iPad Pro, I just sort of fell apart. So again, Chris did a great job of sort of letting me know, hey, there are great, sort of under the hood improvements here, and just also general improvements as well. And I ended up making a, iPadOS 15 student video. So it was a decent update. But yeah, I mean, I think you can agree, Chris, we did expect more, and I think we can expect more this year.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep my hopes measured. You and I privately talked about best case and worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, I get all my wishes. Final Cut comes to the iPad. I can sell my MacBook Pro, but I'd probably get a Mac Studio so I could have an always on automation machine and a backup machine. Right. But I'm not writing the iPad off completely because last year's software update was boring.
No.
I am a little more measured this year. I have switched from editing videos in LumaFusion, not because of anything related to iPadOS, but because I was having some technical issues with the app LumaFusion that just caused me to kind of it was causing delays for me. So I had to move my video editing process from the iPad to the Mac because there is no video editing app, other video editing app on the iPad. That's why a lot of people that do video editing want Final Cut on the iPad, is because, there's LumaFusion, but there's really nothing else that's competitive,
no competition,
or on the same. Yeah, exactly. There's
they have
Adobe
no
Rush,
incentive to make a better app, because with Final Cut, there's Premiere, there's DaVinci Resolve, so they all have to make sure that they're on top of their game. But LumaFusion has been the best thing for video editing on the iPad, and it still is. but compared to these desktop applications, there's no comparison right now, like at all. Yes, you can do and make projects and, you know, make a living. I'm not discouraging people from using it. And if you use it, like, the more power to you. Chris did it for 3 years, and I
4 years.
commend him for 4 years, and I commend him for that, but I couldn't do it. I tried that, and I think it was more so the experience, you know, and just the compatibility and all that. I was already, you know, so deeply invested in Final Cut. But yeah, that's an interesting plan, Chris, you know, to not write the iPad Pro off. I personally, if iPadOS 16 isn't good, of course, I'll still use my iPad for, you know, Apple Pencil things like sketching and drawing and, you know, taking notes and all that. But it's still, I would say my usage will remain the same. It's still sort of a sidekick at this point, and I love it to death. But, you know, if it doesn't, go ahead.
I will say, like, there are things the iPad does better than the Mac. So, for example, I made a couple of videos about how I've been using the iPad Air as my main iPad, and I was going to stick with it until WWDC, until we saw what iPadOS 16 brings. But you might notice, for people that have watched those videos, I have the 12.9-inch iPad Pro in front of me. And that's because I'm working on a podcast project right now. And one of the things that I feel the iPad does a lot better job than the Mac is actually editing podcasts. Not recording, that's a whole separate issue, but editing podcasts, because it has this app called Ferrite that was built from the ground up to be a podcast editor, and I really like the way it works. Well, it works best on the biggest canvas you can have. So that's why I'm using the 12.9-inch iPad Pro again. So there are things, and I think it just depends for everyone, like, what you do differently. I really enjoy, so I do a lot of photography stuff. I enjoy editing photos on the iPad as opposed to editing photos on the Mac. I just like being able to touch the screen and manipulate sliders. I just find that a better workflow.
It's a different experience, you know, like, for sure.
It is.
With the Apple Pencil and the touchscreen. So yeah, I totally agree with you there. Not to totally interrupt you here, but, you know, I'm very good at that. But yeah, I mean, it's a completely different experience, and I'm sure there's a workflow that I will encounter as well that's sort of iPad only. Like, I mean, Procreate, you know, I am really good friends with Canoopsy, Isaac, you may know him, and we are always ideating thumbnails and stuff, and I started drawing with it again. I'm not like an artist, but I'm not gonna, you know, MS Paint my way through my Mac, even though the trackpad is super huge and probably wouldn't be the worst for it. But, you know, like, yeah, there's still things that the iPad does better. You know, I just wish it did more better. You know what I mean? If that's even proper.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. I'm right there with you. Like, there are definitely, like I said at the beginning, I really want the iPad to be my main computer, like my core computer, the one that when I sit down and I'm like, okay, I need to do my work, whatever that work is for the day, whether it's editing videos or photos, recording a podcast, writing, research, dealing with email, whatever it is. I want the iPad to be that computer because I truly love it.
It's
around
refreshing.
My first computer was running Windows 95. Now that's going to make some people feel really old. It's going to make some people feel really young. Whatever. But I've been around computers my whole life since I was 5 years old. And through that time, I've built computers. I've used Macs. I've done a lot. And honestly, nothing has brought me as much joy when it comes to using a computer like using an iPad. So I cannot stress enough how much I truly love the iPad as a computer, but the functionality just isn't there for everything for everyone right now. I know I talk to a lot of like developers, and like when I had my IT career, one issue that I would run across a lot is the ability to not only just write code, because there are text editors that you can write code with. I've did it on the iPad, but you can't really compile or run that code on the iPad because Apple has rules against apps being on the App Store that could do that. And that's one of those things that I think Apple needs to kind of like let go of a little bit and be like, hey, look, this is a computer. People should be able to use it just like they use their Mac. And whether that's allowing side-loading apps or you know, letting, you know, some of the clamping down on the App Store rules and stuff like that, letting go of some of that, I don't know. But I definitely think like the iPad is powerful enough. Like the hardware has never been in question with the iPad. Ever since like the iPad Air 2, the iPad has always been over-engineered, at least the higher-end iPads. So like we know the hardware and the power is there. It's time for the software to catch up.
It's been a while. It seems like since the A8X, like iOS and then eventually iPadOS is just still like not like harnessing all that power there. Maybe they were doing the iPad processor development simply because they wanted to make the Apple Silicon transition and they just had to put it somewhere and have some credibility. But I mean, like, yeah, so that's definitely something we'll talk more about. But before we continue with this conversation here, I have a brief message from today's video sponsor. But real quick, before I continue with the video here, I have a brief message from Bassius, the people that made today's video possible. They got amazing power accessories. For one, their 65-watt, 20,000 milliamp hour portable charger is a lifesaver when I'm out working for the day or taking a trip and not attached to the wall all the time. Not only that, it's super solid feeling and packs the ports I need to keep things powered. On the flip side, their 65-watt GAN wall adapters really make a difference in my life when I'm at home. Offering 4 USB ports, 2 Type-C and 2 Type-A for fast charging my devices and camera batteries. Their extension cord variant is especially helpful and offers an additional 2 full-size power outlets, which is amazing when your power strip is always filled up like mine is. I'll leave a link listed in the video description if you're interested. All right, welcome back. My next question here for Chris and I to discuss is, what are the major features iPadOS needs to compete with but not cannibalize in the process Macs? And maybe I'll start. I definitely need, external monitor support in Final Cut. Maybe Final Cut is my specific feature, but if I had to choose one for the benefit of most, it would have to be external monitor support, because I love using the iPad, just by itself. It's a magical experience, but let's just say you bought that just for yourself. And most of the time you do want to use an iPad, but there's those specific situations where you need to kind of, like go into sport mode and have like a big display out to see what you're researching, to have multiple windows open. And in the past, maybe you think, oh, well, the iPads aren't powerful enough to do that, even though they were. But now more than ever, especially since, the M1 is in the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, which both offer really incredible productivity experiences across, 2 or 1 external display officially. You would think that the iPad could do that, and then some. So that's, I guess, my feature. Final Cut secondly. What about you, Chris?
So I would say for me, just to piggyback off what you said, external monitor support and Final Cut, yeah, those are big ones. For external monitor support, I've talked a lot in videos about the iPad being a modular computer. So you have tablet mode with the iPad. Then you could put it in the Magic Keyboard and you have laptop mode. And then the thing that's kind of missing from that, while you can plug it into a monitor, it just mirrors the display. It would be nice to be able to plug it into a monitor and either have some kind of full screen windowing option, or there's definitely something there. And then Final Cut, but also the other Procreative apps. So Logic, and then, maybe not necessarily this year or even next year, but down the road, Motion, Compressor. Those are important apps to people that do that kind of stuff. But also, last year we got an update to Swift Playgrounds. I feel this is the first true pro app that Apple has made for the iPad. You can now write apps for iOS or iPad right on your iPad using Swift Playgrounds and submit them to the App Store right from there. But there's a lot of things missing, including the ability to set up in-app purchases and stuff like that. So I would like to see Swift Playgrounds become closer to Xcode. A lot of those restrictions go away and stuff like that, because I think there are too many restrictions to make it a viable option for somebody that wants to make an app start to finish from the iPad. So I would like to see that. But then there's also stuff like improvements to Files. I think Files is a really important app, but there is a big difference between Files on the iPad and Finder on the Mac.
It's not exactly. Finder at all.
There's a big difference there. And then I also think settings. There's stuff in settings that needs to be broken out into individual apps.
Sure.
The biggest one that I've heard a lot of people talk about, including myself, is passwords. Passwords should just be its own app. On the Mac, it's called Keychain. It could be called Keychain on the iPad or Password. I really don't care. But I think that would be really important, especially to a lot of people that don't understand good password management, don't recycle passwords, have complex auto-generated passwords. I think that would be a helpful feature. Better shortcuts support. So shortcuts came to the Mac this last year, something I was very excited about along with others. And shortcuts on the Mac has actions that the iPad doesn't, like scripting with using AppleScript and stuff like that. That'd be really cool if that came to the iPad. And then I kind of touched on this a little bit, but some sort of developer mode. Like, I get Apple not wanting the ability for users to compile code on the iPad because it's not secure for whatever, that'll be their answer if you ask them. But I honestly think there should be a developer mode, whether you have like, hey, you have a free or paid for Apple developer account, sign in with it. Okay, you have developer mode on your iPad. Now you can compile code or something like that. Like, just enough to like prove that you know what you're doing, and like, okay, you're agreeing to this, and then do it. And then finally, some sort of backup system. This is just important, not just for video editors. That's always been my example in the past, and people go like, oh, but that just sounds like some video No, backups are important for anyone. The only way to back up an iPad right now is to do an iCloud backup, and it backs up the image of the iPad. So if you need to restore something, you have to restore the whole iPad from a backup, which is a pain. I want file and folder backups, whether that's to iCloud. Preferably give me external drive options. Basically, like, give me
I was going to say that. It's huge.
Yeah, external drives, whether they're USB or network, because I have a NAS in the other room that I back up my Mac to. I would love to be able to do the same thing with my iPad and just let that run in the background. So those are kind of my core features. I could go on all day, but I won't. I won't.
It's great to have you here. Like I said, Chris is a really intense iPad user, more so than I have been. And, as you may know, my channel really grew off of iPad Pro content, more in a student productivity type way. But he's really into that, and we always have fun discussing sort of the possibilities that might come with iPadOS. I will wrap up this little topic with another wish of mine for proper external SSD or just drive support, because it's great to have a lot of internal space. Like, I have 4 terabytes here on my MacBook Pro. I wish I had more, honestly. But with the iPad, they only have 2 terabytes in total. But also, there's some projects you might want to work externally on. I do freelance work now, and I don't want to have some files on my device. So if Apple allowed you to store an app library on an external drive without necessarily having the app developer supported officially, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but that seems to be the case, or what you can do with the Mac, so I can't see why it couldn't happen with the iPad. That would also ask for or need or require a better file system, And I think this kind of brings us to our next question here. A previous question was what should be ported over to the Mac, but I think we covered that. But my next question is, will iPad Pro ever replace your Mac? And maybe I'll go first just because, I'm more of a Mac user at the end of the day, or have been. I don't think it will for now. In the future, we have no idea. I don't want to predict anything 10 years down the line, because, revolutionary products come, or breakthroughs or whatever, when they put a powerful enough chip into a skinny enough device where it doesn't matter if it's in a tower or a tablet, that might be a possibility or a reality one day. But for now, I know that the Mac is going to be more powerful. And, the 16-inch MacBook Pro is its own distinct experience, for example. It's like a portable iMac to me. So, I know that my Mac is going to be good at many things, and I know my iPad is going to be good at some things. Like I said, I just hope that gets better at more things. But that's my 2 cents here. Chris, you have a whole plan set up if iPadOS 16 is good, isn't that right?
Yeah, so for me, the question you asked is, will the iPad or iPad Pro ever replace your setup? In the past, it has. I was a big Mac user, and then I went all in on the iPad. In fact, it was like 2 months after LumaFusion launched, I found the app. It was in a rough early state, but I was like, you know what? I really want to try this. Like, this is the thing I want to do, and I went all in on it, and I loved it, and it worked for me for years up until about December of last year, 2021. That's when everything... No, I'm sorry, not December. October of 2021.
Yeah.
That's when things started falling apart for me, and I started to look around and ended up getting a MacBook Pro in December. But for me, it's all kind of coming down to what iPadOS 16 and WWDC announces. If we get iPadOS 16 and it gives me a lot of those features I want, like better file support, backups, even a more robust spotlight, better shortcuts integration, better background app support and stuff like that. Like all that kind of core stuff, I will definitely consider moving back to the iPad and giving LumaFusion a shot. Now, the kicker for me that I would just go all in on the iPad after I got a chance to try it out is if Final Cut comes to the iPad. Because I do a lot of video editing. I know not everyone's video editors, I understand, but I am a video editor and I do a lot of it. If Final Cut comes to the iPad, I think I would just go all in on the iPad, sell my MacBook Pro. So I have an M1 Mac Mini here that I keep forgetting I have, and I need to sell it. I originally got it for like an always-on automation and backup computer and stuff like that. But anyways, that's besides the point. Sell those two machines, probably get a Mac Studio similarly spec to my MacBook Pro. So I have an always-on automation machine, a file server, and a backup computer in case something happens. Because I put a lot of betas. Like, I put the iPadOS beta on my main iPad, and a lot of times that breaks video editing and stuff in the past. Like, it's broke a lot of things. So I need to have a stable machine. So that would kind of be a fallback machine for, oh no, video editing's broken because I have a beta on this thing. Let's
or maybe it's like too intense, right? Because I mean, like, I'll be real.
Yeah, because I do.
You know, like multicam, like 8K, like, you know, there's always going to be stuff that the M1 Max does better, you know, unless they implement it in to the iPad Pro.
I'm not too worried about like 8K stuff, because like by the time I get into that, like the iPad Pro will get even more powerful. So I'm not too worried about
Probably,
that.
Yeah.
I do some intense videos, like my previously mentioned iPadOS walkthrough videos. The last one was 40 minutes long. It had just a ton of clips. It was huge. It was edited on the iPad. It was fully edited on the iPad, but that was one of the videos I had so many issues with. It took so many times trying to export it to get it properly exported that it started to be death by 1,000 cuts for me. It was just like, I got it to work.
So bad you bought a Mac.
Yeah, and so yeah, like that's kind of like where it was. So we'll see what ends up happening. I am not putting anything in stone right now.
Let me stop you, because that's my last question.
Mode.
I'm interrupting Chris for the third time.
No, go ahead.
15th time here. You know, this is just how we do it. This is what happens on the phone too. But my last question is, what features should we expect? Like best, worst case scenario, maybe realistic case scenario. Before I say anything, we don't know things. We don't have inside sources. Yeah. We don't leak stuff. I have no idea. We can only speculate based off of the just external environmental factors. We've studied Apple as a company for a while, although we're not like business, people who are analyzing every angle and, stock price and whatever. But we know the hardware. We've looked at it for years, and we can kind of, sort of blindly guess. So Chris, why don't you go first?
I would say educated guesses.
Educated guesses, not quite guessing.
Like, I've been using the iPad long enough. I see the trends. So for me, I would say there's two things in like realistic, pretty much guaranteed column. Improvements to multitasking and home screen updates. Those are the two things.
I hope so.
So, improvements to multitasking, I'm hoping this is some sort of like windowing feature, even external monitor support. Like that's kind of what I'm counting in the multitasking realm. Maybe on the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, the ability to have 3 apps side by side and like kind of the slide over size column. That would be interesting. Improvements to home screen. There's one really like obvious thing that hasn't been added, and that is interactive widgets. So right now, there are only 2 widgets that don't fall into this category. But right now, if you tap on a widget, say you have like a task manager, and you tap on the box to mark something as completed, it opens the app. You can't mark it as completed right from the widget.
So it's a stupid widget. It's cosmetic, basically.
Yeah, it's a launcher essentially. So there are 2 widgets that you can interact with. So it's totally possible. There is an API for it, but it's private. Shortcuts and contacts. Those are the 2 widgets that are actually interactive. So if you tap on, in shortcuts, if you tap on a shortcut, it'll run the shortcut in the background. If you tap on a contact, it gives you a custom menu that instead of opening the contacts app. So it's totally possible. I'm hoping that API opens up. So those are the things that I'd realistically want to see. Do you want me to tell you kind of my not so realistic, maybe possibly?
Well, I think we share the sort of like unrealistic. I think the unrealistic one possibly. I mean, you know what? I don't even want to get myself excited. But if Final Cut comes, that is like it's going to be a great summer for me because I'm going to really sort of dive back into the iPad Pro. And I'm not going to lie, like, I really love my Mac, but it is a bit of a liability. And I'm not here to be like, oh, I bought a spec'd out one and I'm going to flex on all you. I bought a spec'd out one and I don't want to have this in my backpack all the time. It worries me. Like, this is like my main machine. And yes, I'm going to have to bring it places. But the iPad is not only less expensive, even though it still is expensive, in the grand scheme of things, but it's so
especially
refreshing,
if you bought
so light. Yeah, so
especially
I
if
really
you bought a. I was just gonna say, especially if you bought a 2 terabyte 2021 one. I don't know anybody that did that at all.
That's spec'd out, but if you're like me and you bought the baseline $1,000 128 gig model that you would probably hook up an external drive to, I mean, yeah, it's a pretty compelling machine. It's less of a worry, it's less of a hassle. Yes, it's big. I mean, in the case of the 12.9, but like, I want it to be my sidekick. I want to start projects on it. I want to be able to maybe be on the go and work on a Photoshop file and then airdrop that to my Mac and finish on my display. I want it to be sort of an extension of my Mac more than it is right now. But in your case, I mean, you wanted to replace your Mac, which is great, and I'm sure your people, your audience would be really excited for that, right?
Yeah, I want my iPad not just to be my main computer, but my portable computer. I have a lot of trips planned for this summer. It's the computer that would go in my backpack. The thing that's just holding me back is video editing. I just recently did a what's in my bag video, and I talked in that video yes, I technically could fit both my iPad and my MacBook in this bag. I'm not going to. That's just a lot of extra weight. Those are both relatively heavy machines.
I do it.
Yeah, but I'm not going to. And so I mentioned in that video, I have to ask myself before every trip, is this something I'm going to be editing video on? If the answer is no, then I could take my iPad. If the answer is yes, then I take my MacBook. But I don't want to have to ask that question. I just want my because I don't like bouncing back and forth between computers, because I'm somebody that's trying a lot of different apps, a lot of different services, a lot of different shortcuts and stuff like that. And I don't want to have to reset stuff up on 3 different computers. Having an iPhone and an iPad is perfect, but once you add a third device into that mix, or a fourth device, it just starts to get to be too much.
It competes for attention. You have to choose one. I honestly choose my Mac most of the time because it does what I need it to do at any time that I want it to, in the best way possible. So it's I'm almost neglecting my iPad because my Mac, for the most part, does more of what I need it to do.
Yeah, and I get that. I know a lot of people that prefer the Mac, and especially since because let's be honest for a minute, the whole Intel, that late era Intel, 2016 to the end of the Intel era for Macs was not a great time for the Macs. That was when a lot of people left the Mac. It was let's see if I can make this iPad my computer and stuff like that.
It was better now that in every way.
And now that the Apple Silicon is in the Macs and stuff like that, people are okay, hey, I can, I'm transitioning back because the Mac is more capable software-wise.
Yes.
So I get and not in every way, like we discussed earlier. You have things like the Apple Pencil and certain applications that are on the iPad, but I feel like there's just another shoe that is ready to drop for the iPad, and I'm sitting here waiting patiently or not so patiently, depending on your point of view. But I'm just I'm ready for it, and I feel it's coming. I'm hoping.
It seems more possible. I'm just hoping it's this year. Yeah. I think it's more possible this year. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But I will also say I felt it was very possible last year. So
yes.
I who knows? If my gut feeling is true that there was a lot more slated for iPadOS 15 that got postponed, then that would make sense. We'll see. Honestly, that's that. At the end of the day, I still love the iPad. iPad will always have some place in my workflow. I just want it to be. Sure. I personally want it to be a more prominent place than what it is right now at this minute.
Yeah, I totally agree too, and that kind of brings us to this sort of final wrap up part of this video. I was just thinking as you were saying all that, the iPad will never be the Mac. It's never going to be the Mac.
Yeah,
and we all have to accept that. It's not going to be as powerful.
I don't want it to be the Mac.
Yeah, no, but
and for the record, I do not want the iPad to run Mac OS. Like,
No,
that was
I
a
don't
very
either.
common thing like a year ago or
Yeah.
2 years ago that people were
It would
like,
be
just
gross.
bring Mac. No, I don't want
would
it.
be
Because
disgusting.
if I wanted
Yeah.
a computer running Mac OS, I would just use a Mac.
Buy a Mac.
I want
Use a cursor
iPadOS.
and a keyboard, you know? Like, it's
Yeah.
like, the trackpad is this big on my Mac for a reason, right? Like, it's designed to, you know, allow you to really finely adjust settings and buttons in Mac OS. That's the experience. But with iPad, you're using your finger, you're using the Apple Pencil, and it's supposed to be a different experience. So I don't want it to be less of an iPad. I just want it to be more like a Mac without sacrificing that iPad experience. And you know, I do think it's a realistic expectation this year because, again, we are now sort of nearing the end or just sort of the give up phase of the pandemic. You know, people are going back to work despite the economy being woo. But you know what I mean? Like, Apple has had time to catch up on whatever they have been working on secretly behind closed doors. And I hope that they have. I hope that they are delivering something exciting this year. And I think that they might, or I think that they will, because they've listened to us. I mean, for example, you know, the touch bar is gone off of the MacBook Pro. Everybody complained about that for years and years and years. And Apple usually does, or historically did, what it wants to do. But I mean, this laptop was sort of a concession, or like a, what is it?
It was a
compromise. It was
reversing
like
course.
a gift. It was like a gift
Well,
to the pro users after years.
I wouldn't
of
say
just
it's
like,
a compromise, because a compromise means you're giving and taking. I would say it's a reversing course. Like, it was,
Yeah,
we're
that's
putting
fair.
ports back. We're getting rid of
You got
the touch
the ports
bar.
back.
Like,
It's thick.
here's a good keyboard. Like, like
They're
yeah,
like listening.
but,
That's my point. They're listening to
Yes.
users, and I think that they have heard our woes. Maybe they watched your videos. Maybe they watched my videos. If anybody in Cupertino is listening to this, we love the iPad. We want it to be more capable while still being an iPad. So that's all I got to say. Any other final thoughts, Chris?
No, I think we've summed it up. I'm very much looking forward to WWDC. Like, I
am as well.
am very, very excited for it. But honestly, I'm just kind of like in a wait and see mode. I will be doing my big iPadOS walkthrough video no matter what it is.
Sure.
Well, as long as there's something, but I'm sure there'll be something.
There's gonna be something.
But yeah. So we'll see.
We will see, guys. We will see. We're not promising you anything. We are just sort of continuing the conversation that we had last year with a more positive attitude and more realistic expectations, which I honestly have none. Not in a negative way. I just don't want to make myself excited. And I don't want to hype you guys up because there's clearly too much of that with all the leaks and rumors and fake stories and news articles and whatever about Apple stuff. So I try not to do that. Obviously, Chris tries not to do that. But this has been great. Chris, thank you for coming on here. Great
Absolutely.
to continue to
Thanks
talk.
for having me.
I'm excited. Yeah, of course. I'm happy to interrupt you any day. But listen, guys, Chris and I can talk for 3 hours, and you know we have to moderate each other, otherwise we just just go off on a tangent that's way too long. So you know,
we usually, when we have phone calls, we usually have to set like a time that's saying, okay, we're ending this call because we'll just keep going. So
and it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It ends up being like 2
hours.
Oh
no, we always go past the time. We always go past it.
Like that. But it's great to have a public conversation with you, Chris. And
absolutely.
This has been great. Again, we have not promised you anything. We will find out in a few weeks here, and I'm excited. I'm excited either way. I know Chris and I will continue to make the best content that we possibly can, despite iPadOS 16 maybe being another letdown or not quite what we sort of expect it to be realistically. But yeah, honestly, we'll be fine. We're all going to be fine. The iPad's still going to be the iPad. Again, we just hope that it's better. And that's been it. That's all the thoughts I have right now. I need to go to the grocery store, and Chris needs to turn on his AC, right?
Yeah, it is. Every time we do these videos, it is stinking hot. So yes, I thank you so much for having me on.
Of course, it's always my pleasure. All right, guys, we will catch you in the next podcast, not a podcast, or whatever this is. And I will catch you all in the next one. Peace out.